Before we get into our short movie, I want to read from Luke chapter 17, verses 26 through 30. It says, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be also in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they wrought, they sowed, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed." So when we look at this verse and we're looking at the words of Jesus, Jesus being a first century rabbi, like most Jewish teachers, he coupled Sodom with the flood generation as a typical image of evil. His attempt was to inform his audience that at his second coming, the conditions of the world would mirror Noah's days and the days of Sodom and Gomorrah. So in this movie, this short movie, we will explore how humanity had became so corrupt and evil, and it came to a pinnacle of where God had to say, enough is enough. I'm going to destroy mankind for their wickedness. It shows also too in the days of Noah the escalation of demonic and fallen angels activity had become at a pinnacle where it was a culmination of both spiritual and human evil was taking place, where God had to end up judging this world, the known world at that time, in the days of Noah.
And daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they took them wives of all which they chose.
Let us select for ourselves wives from the offspring of men. We will father a mighty race to rule this world. That we may take them as wives. They shall bear us children and mighty men of renown. We swear to protect your people and your land. Take whatever you desire. Might makes right in this world.
This root holds the power of life. They took wives and chose one. Watch the movement of the stars. They consumed all the acquisitions of men.
We cannot sustain you!
Yield to me, the earth cries out against them. Then the earth laid out. This metal will make you powerful. Antimony will make you beautiful. The stars tell the future.
But the angels transgressed this appointment, and were captivated by love of women, and begot children who are those that are called demons, and among men afterwards subdued the human to an animal. Rabbi Huna said, "The generation of the flood was not blotted out from the world until they wrote marriage documents for a male to a male and a human to an animal."
Now, when we look at 1 Enoch 69 and 12, some of the key teachings that these fallen angels taught humanity was as follows: demonic demise, which introduced wicked smitings of spirits and demons, which refers to sorcery, exorcism, or using evil spirits to attack others. They also taught abortion secrets, which they revealed to mankind how to strike the embryo in the womb that it may pass away, and effectively teaching humans how to terminate pregnancies. They also taught serpent strikes, which they introduced bites of the serpent and demonic internal attacks against the human soul. And they also taught noontide destruction, which brought about magical afflictions of spiritual illness that strike people through extreme heat of the noon sun. So when we dive into the rabbinic writings, when we look at the Midrash Rabbah of Genesis Rabbah 23 and 2, it states, and Lamech took two wives, Adai and Zillah. This is found in Genesis 4 and 19. This is what the men of the generation of the flood would do. Each of them would take two wives, one for procreation and the other for mere sexual pleasure. The one for procreation would sit like a widow in her lifetime, since she was used only to be made pregnant, but then had no sexual relations for any other purpose. The one for sexual pleasure would be given a cup of bitters so that she would not become pregnant, and she would sit before her husband like a common whore. So when we dive in, we look a little bit more to summarize what the men pre-flood would do with their two wives. The division of the marital roles, men of the generation systematically separated the purposes of marriage into two distinct roles, given two different wives. The mother, Adai, was the wife that was designated strictly for bearing children. Once pregnant, she was given birth. She would be neglected emotionally and sexually, living in isolation like a widow while her husband was still alive. On the other hand, you look at the other companion, Zillah. The second wife was kept solely for companionship, sexual gratification. She was forced to drink a cup of bitters or a form of contraceptive that left her sterile by this herb to prevent pregnancy, treating her like a temporary commodity or a common whore rather than a true spouse. So we see the debauchery and the level of sin and wickedness that took place during the days of Noah and pre-flood times, how men would conduct themselves with their wives, having these two types of wives.
All flesh had corrupted its way. Animals mated with different species. Even the earth yielded only thorns. Society was deeply corrupt. Widespread shamas filled the earth. Lawlessness and petty theft became the norm. Josephus notes that the pre-flood generation rebelled against God. They relied on the tyrannical strength of their giant offspring.
Much blood is being shed upon the earth. Bring our cause before the Most High.
Methuselah lived to be 969 years old. His name means, when he dies, it shall be sent. The flood.
The real crime is that they want to raise up their own nations. They want their own populations. They want to imitate God without his permission. It's kind of a Gnostic flavor to that, if you know a little bit about Gnosticism. So this is what's going to become the real issue here. They were all of them 200, and they descended in the days of Yared onto the peak of Mount Hermon. Okay, Hermon is the key location. And they called the mountain Hermon because they swore and bound one another with a curse on it. Okay, this Hermon in Hebrew is related to, it's a better way to say it, same root as Kerem, again, the devote to destruction, to put under the ban, that sort of thing. So there's an association there between the terms. These and all the others with them took for themselves wives, and among them such as they chose, they began to go into them and defile themselves through them. Again, they defiled themselves. This is a transgression of heaven and earth. To teach them sorcery and charms, and to reveal to them the cutting of roots and plants, and they conceived from them and bore to them great giants. Asael, another character, taught men to make swords of iron and weapons and shields and breastplates and every instrument of war. He showed them metals of the earth, how they should work gold to fashion it suitably, and concerning silver to fashion it for bracelets and ornaments for women. He showed them concerning antimony and eye paint and all manner of precious stones and dyes. Now you're probably thinking of the passage in 1 Peter already about the cosmetic, issue. And there was much godlessness upon the earth, and they made their ways desolate. Shemchaza taught spells and the cutting of roots. And then you get a list of which watcher taught what to people. You get this whole list. You get signs of shooting stars, signs of the earth, signs of the sun, signs of the moon. Again, astrological stuff. They all began to reveal mysteries to their wives and to their children. As men were perishing, the cry went up to heaven. So in Enoch, even in this section and elsewhere in the book, the problem with all this isn't that we know how to make something that's made of iron, or we use, eye paint to make ourselves beautiful. The problem is what people did with it. It corrupted them. So it takes the problem of lust and makes it worse. It takes the problem of just any technology and makes it worse. People began to use things for self-destruction, for destruction of their fellow man, that sort of thing. So this is what the passage is going through. In a nutshell, what First Enoch is saying here is, look, we know we had this thing, the fall, and we know people are sinners, but they consistently blame the watchers for teaching people how to be even better sinners. Okay, in other words, giving them more tools to destroy themselves. And this isn't much of a conceptual leap anyway for us, because any technology that we have can be used for the same thing. Okay, I can commit horrendous crimes with a phone. I mean, I can blow things up with a phone. I mean, you can just use something that ordinarily it's just simple. It's technology. I mean, I can commit a crime with a fork. I can stab someone. Anything that we have, can be used to an evil end. And that's really what Enoch is going to be angling for here. And they blame part of it on people, the fall, because of just who we are, our internal sinful impulse, the lack of, we don't have God's nature, God's character. We make choices to do evil. So people are going to get plenty of blame. But then people being taught and how to express their own impulses, their own wickedness in various ways. That's a big deal in Second Temple Judaism. First Enoch 9, you have 4 angels, archangels, Michael, Sariel, Raphael, and Gabriel, see the terrible events unfolding on earth. They approach God for a solution. Basically, you got to do something about this. Look at what's going on. You have to do something about this. The 4 archangels say to God in 1 Enoch 9:11, you know all things before they happen. You see these things and you permit them. And you do not tell us what we ought to do with them with regard to these things. I mean, we're here to help. What should we do? God responds in 1 Enoch 10 with the news that should sound familiar to biblical readers. This is when you get the flood. When the Most High said, the great Holy One spoke, he sent Sariel to the son of Lamech, which was Noah, saying, go to Noah and say to him in my name, hide yourself, reveal to him that the end is coming, the whole world will perish, tell him that a deluge is about to come, so on and so forth. So in the Bible, in the Old Testament, Genesis 6, 1 through 4 precedes the flood, okay? It's just that in Genesis 6, 1 to 4, those 4 verses to us, key thought here, to us, lack context. We read them and it's like, well, what does that have to do with the flood? Why are these 4 verses even here? I mean, you get to verse 5 and okay, everything that man does is wicked. We get that. And then Noah starts to have this conversation with God, and then we have the flood narrative. Well, what do the 4 verses have to do with this? We lack the context. An Israelite, again, a literate Israelite, would not have lacked the context. That's the disconnect. A literate Israelite would know, these 4 verses sort of compress this story that, is really a response to Mesopotamia, because Mesopotamia has the same story. And the writer just sort of took it for granted, that people are going to know what I'm talking about. I don't need to just rehash all this stuff. And this is a precursor to the flood. People living in the Second Temple period had the context as well. We just don't, because we don't read that stuff. We don't read the literature of the great wider world to know these 4 verses in Genesis 6 are responding to something. This stuff in First Enoch is recovering or preserving or transmitting the larger story that Genesis 6, 1 through 4 was a response to. Okay, we lack all of that. And unfortunately, again, because of the history of the Christian church, we not only lack it, it's been kept from you. You have been cut off from it. Again, it's not like, oh, the gospel's really in Enoch, we're missing. No, that isn't the point at all. The point is that if you had read this, there are, again, things you would read in your Bible that would, okay, the lights go on. I kind of get what they're talking about here because I've read this other thing that they were familiar with. So we have an immediate disconnect. Even with the flood story, we just get these 4 verses. So again, just to summarize here, we have the flood story, the judgment here in the second half. Until the day of their judgment, consummation. Again, the watchers are imprisoned until the eternal judgment is consummated. They're sent to the abyss, to the prison. Again, that's language you get in the New Testament, where they will be confined forever. And at the time of judgment, it's not really forever. It's until the time of the judgment. Well, when's the time of the judgment in biblical theology? It's at the end of days. What's the end of days? It's the day of the Lord. It's the return of the Messiah. All this kind of stuff. Okay? So there is a finite endpoint to this. But that's where they are. So this is a summary from, I believe, Reed's book. Yeah. The birth of the giants is explored in terms of the mingling of spirits and flesh. Angels properly dwell in heaven. Humans properly dwell on earth. But the nature of the giants is mixed. This transgression of categories brings terrible results. After their physical death, the giants' demonic spirits come forth from their bodies to plague humankind. The citations there are from 1 Enoch. According to 1 Enoch 16, the angelic transmission of heavenly knowledge to earthly humans can also be understood as a contamination of distinct categories within God's orderly creation. As inhabitants of heaven, the watchers were privy to all the secrets of heaven. Their revelation of this knowledge to the inhabitants of the earth was categorically improper as well as morally destructive.